Okay, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Can everybody hear us okay?
Yeah.
Super, good stuff. Well, thanks for coming to the panel today, much appreciated. First of all, huge thank you to the Mill Valley Film Festival. Super, yes, round of applause for that, indeed. It's been a great week. Well done to everybody who's been part of it, everybody who contributed, everybody who volunteered, much appreciated. But without further ado, we're going to get to our last panel. We made it. Yay, guys, we made it. My name is Martin Christian. I work with Iodine, with ProData, and it is my honour, really, to introduce our guests here. Working from the furthest there, we have Diane Perlman. Hi, Diane. How you doing? She's a producer and executive director, works with the Berkshire Film and Media Collaborative. 30 years experience in digital VFX as a digital VFX producer, and also the executive producer at Disrupt AR. Your credits include, here we go, The Matrix, What Dreams May Come, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Eraser, Judge Dredd, my favourite, Starship Troopers. Ladies and gentlemen, Diane Perlman. What a list there. Okay, coming in next, we have David Stump, ASC. 30 plus years as a director of photography there, a visual effects DP, visual effects supervisor, Emmy Award winner, Academy Award winner of Science and Technology Achievement, an ICG Award, International Cinematographers Guild Award. Credits including The Morning Show, James Bond, Quantum of Solace, X-Men, Contact, my personal favourite, Mars Attacks. Ladies and gentlemen, David Stump, ASC. And last but not least, but closest to me here, is Amanda K. Price. She's a producer, currently just wrapped on Bass Reeves. That'll be coming out November 5th. Several Emmy Award wins, including an Edward R. Murrow Award. Ooh, very nice, I know. She's currently working on Surface Season 2. Credits include Future Man, created by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. Also works with Evan Goldberg's Real Start organization, and has worked with Reese Witherspoon with her company Hello Sunshine, Daisy Jones and the Six, Little Fires Everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda K. Price. First of all, thank you so much for coming, the three of you. What a lineup we have. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a summary of what we're going to be up to here. We're going to be looking at, we call it the balancing act, of virtual production in the creative process. We're going to be looking at with the help of our amazing panel here, we're going to be covering some of the basics. We're also going to be digging into a little bit of the technical, but a little bit of the creative aspects of how that intersects. So we're going to be looking at that. So we're going to kick things off. Dave, you're going to be my resident tech man. Then I gotta kick off with you, because I'd like you to take me through, and like I'm 4-year-old, take me through the most basic virtual production setup.
So as it currently stands, the way we do virtual production is we line up visual effects shots or production shots against an LED volume, which is usually a semicircular wall, right. Sometimes a floor, sometimes a ceiling of LEDs. We attach a motion tracking device to the top of the camera, right, that tells us where we are in space, in 3D space, and where we are positionally in 6 degrees of freedom. We then use that motion data to drive an Unreal Engine, which contains pre-rendered CG scenes that obey the motion data of the camera, track in parallax, change in size, change in focal length as we move the camera. And we can create 3D composites on set, live, against the LED wall with actors in the foreground.
Okay, so we're literally talking virtual background, we're talking subject, actor, then we're talking camera, and then camera is talking back to background. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, right. And it's all interactive, including illuminance, lights, right, for the actors in the foreground that are also being driven by the engine from camera data.
Interesting. Okay, so it's literally just one full circle workflow of information that's going around the actor, basically.
Massive amounts of metadata flying around the set.
Metadata. Huge amounts of metadata. I'm interested, and actually this is a question both for you, Dave, and Amanda. I'm interested how that, what is the kind of, is that the simplest form of it? Thank you very much. Didn't even have to ask that. Is that the simplest form of it? We're talking about this big LED volume. Is that, or how does that scale down, I think is what I'm saying.
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, you can go for it.
If anyone. So kind of the simplest version of it is probably standard rear projection. You know, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, you used to see driving shots with Laurel and Hardy and a filmed background that was rear projected behind them. And then moving on to front projection, Superman and Stand By Me.
Right.
And the current version of that is using an LED screen, and sometimes even a very, very large television set behind the actors to do simple flat backgrounds that have no 3D parallax in them. So the simple version is something we've been doing in motion picture production for probably 100 years.
Interesting. So it's really kind of it's an old technique but with new tools. Is that fair to say?
And vastly modernized.
Right.
That we can do 3D with it is the new twist.
So that's how virtual background, sort of something that makes a virtual background. That is something that has kind of been done in various forms in the past. But what makes it now what we call virtual production? That's the Unreal Engine part of it?
Yes, it is. And the Unreal Engine has entirely constructed 3D scenes that you can move through with 6 degrees of freedom driven by the camera.
And it's live shifting the background.
Right, so the parallax, for example, as you dolly left to right or right to left,
right, the
parallax in the scene on the LED screen moves in parallax.
Right. Presumably that's, for the camera, that's really the only perspective obviously you care about, but for everybody else standing on set, I'm sure it looks probably a little bit odd.
Well, I'm fond of saying that the scene goes to hell in a handbasket just outside the frame line.
Right. So it's really only good for one person, and they're not going to see it for months till afterwards, yes.
Well, it's good for the audience, but on set, the operator can see it, and anyone watching the video feed can see it.
Right, super. Actually, Amanda, then I'll sort of ask you, because what we're talking about there is, so we're talking about these assets that need to be created for the LED wall. I think of all the behind-the-scenes footage that I've watched of, you know, every single film from Terminator to here to there. It's all of that stuff. It's always a chroma key green background. That means, in my mind, if I'm correct, the weight of the work is done in post-production. But now this is different, I presume. The weight of the work is done pre-production, right? It's kind of flipped.
Yeah, it's definitely flipped. Where it still comes in conjunction with it is that post is needed for the asset itself.
Right.
So oftentimes we'll have, like, an editor will have to edit, if it's a driving scene, the editor will have to edit the pieces so that the actors can act to what's happening in camera.
Right.
Because it's also, if it's just a raw video.
Right. Okay.
You have to time it with dialogue.
But all of those assets that are created, you're not doing them in a day.
No,
that's done.
No, they're
way
done
ahead of time.
Weeks, months in advance, oftentimes, because that's the key to virtual production is pre-planning.
Pre-planning. Well, then how early are you part of that process, and who's really kicking that process off?
Personally, not early enough. It's a toss-up. It actually, because sometimes on the shows that I tend to be a producer on, they're big, massive, post-heavy production shows. So I'm on a show 4 months before we're rolling camera.
Right.
So I'm involved from the very idea that when the production designer and the team decide that we're going to even shoot these scenes, virtual production. So I'm personally involved. But on a smaller show, mostly it's like a 2 week before cameras are rolling that I'm hired on. So it ranges, but it's never enough time. I always say like 6 months before first roll camera would be great.
Yeah, and I see Diane smiling there because I feel like there's a similar pain point for all three of you.
Well, it is, because it was always fix it in post. And I think there are a lot of people that, the company I work with now, Disrupt AR, like, we actually lost a job because an ad agency didn't understand. They had said, well, we budgeted for 4 weeks of post. And I said, no, that's 4 weeks of pre-production. We will design the set. We will film your corporate executives in real time, and you will have it the day after, right? So as as opposed to LED screens, which
Yeah.
is used a lot in film work, the corporate world and actually lower budgets are still using green screen. It's highly viable still, right? And we
Yeah.
are using all the same tracking and things like that. So not everybody can afford an LED wall or to shoot on an LED stage.
Right.
And I think green screen is still highly viable.
I mean, is it fair to say it's obviously you can play buzzword bingo in production sometimes, and virtual
Did I
production.
use buzzwords?
You did virtual production. We hit LED wall. I think there's
Okay,
there's going to be
sorry.
a few more throughout.
Stop us, we're nerds up
That's all
here.
right. You'll call bingo eventually. But volume. We use that one as well. We got that already. But I think these things are thought of as a silver bullet, aren't they? It's just like, oh, this is a new technology. It's going to solve this. It's going to do everything for. And we were talking earlier about a lot of people thought it was going to replace using a green screen. But what's the realism of that in the mix of that?
I've got to say, any effects technique, blue screen, green screen, rear projection, LED wall, even miniatures, everything is horses for courses. You have to be pretty trained and, pretty well experienced to sit down and break down a script and decide what the best technique for any given scenario or any given scene is.
Yeah.
Always keeping the prime axiom of motion picture filmmaking in mind, which is succeed by the narrowest possible margin.
Right. You've been coming out with great quotes for T-shirts all weekend, and that's another good one, Dave. Which actually brings us to the next point. I wanted to talk about that kind of line between, and it sounds a little romantic, the line between virtual reality and reality. Right now, I don't think this is exclusive to virtual production. Essentially, the decision of what gets physically created versus what do we virtually create. I know you were actually chatting about an airplane. We were chatting about that. What was kind of the decision? Where was the decision made there?
On Daisy.
Right.
The decision was made too late. Time.
It's gonna be a running theme. Bingo.
It's the idea, I think, that you always want to respect the creative process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in post, like we're just as creative as the writer, the director, those pieces. And I think for me and for my teams, it's about the most cost-effective way, but also time. Time is money and money is time.
Mm.
And what does my shoot day look like? What does my, I'm not a line producer, so the line producer's planning that aspect of it. But
Right.
with Daisy, for instance, we were on a tarmac in New Orleans, and the decision that our actors were coming down the stairs, and the first thing I said was, this is a 5-minute scene.
Right.
Where's my airplane? Like, I can't. You want to do 5 minutes of a scene in visual effects? Like, do you know how expensive that is? It's at least $20,000 a shot, and it's a 5-minute back and forth with 35 characters. Like, what are you like? No.
They say, great. How long's it going to take?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, like what? Okay. And so we ended up having to have, we had to have an airplane body, like brought in from LA to New Orleans.
You had it shipped all the way from.
Yeah, well, shipped is it was driven,
driven,
it was
dragged.
pulled. But yeah, and because it was cheaper to do that than it is to create, a wall or do, anything.
Create an airplane for the
but
shots that
what we
5
did,
minutes,
we kind of split the difference. So you had the front half, if you watch Daisy Jones and the Six, the airplane, it's only the middle body that's actual body. Everything else is VFX.
Yeah, so you basically did a combination of the two, and so you would have had to have worked with in the VFX. You would have then had to work with the art department in order to mix the physical, and then you're working with the VFX department to kind of match those two together.
I mean, my favorite is the art department. They're masterminds. Just like the production designers are incredible, which is a lot about what that's a lot of virtual production is you have to have an incredible talented production designer who understands, yes, this is a very post heavy thing, but they have to create the model in front of it.
Right.
You know, I have to say, of all the people in production who have an aptitude for this kind of work, the production designers probably have the best aptitude for it.
Really?
Yeah, it's astounding.
And it's everything from the artistic eye to the actual, talking about perspective?
Yeah, or just the construction of the set and the construction of the scene.
Yeah, an example is on Tiny Beautiful Things, Hulu show. I'm just name dropping all the Hello Sunshine shows.
Drop all the names you like.
Is the scene that we did. Our character, she's on Mount Everest, or she's in at the top of the mountain, and that's all virtual production. But we created, our production designer created this mountain out of foam, like an ice cap mountain. And like when you go to set, you're like, what is this? And then the LED, then you see the LED wall, and you're like, oh, she's on the top of a mountain. But there's like these fans, and like everything's like, it's amazing, it's incredible. But for instance, like that scene, when we're talking about time and money and budget, that scene was it was specific for that moment, and it worked flawlessly. But it was for that moment, and it was one character. It wasn't. It was a cheaper show, an inexpensive show, but for that moment, it was actually the best use of, full virtual reality.
Just got to move that slider to get it right for what the final goal is.
Yeah, it was. I cried. I legitimately cried. Like I walked onto set and just bawled because it was just amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think the difference is, having worked in the industry for over 30 years, is we were always an afterthought, even on some very complicated films.
Yeah.
Except for The Matrix, the Wachowskis brought us in. Like they storyboarded every single scene, which was unheard of, and a gift to a producer, right? Because everybody always says, oh, can you create something that's never been seen before? And we nod and say yes. And then we'd go back and you say to your team, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? But I think the difference is, in any kind of visual effects, we have a seat at the table in the beginning. And people are realizing that if you're going to use your resources wisely and have a cost-effective budget and make your budget, as opposed to, like on Judge Dredd, it went way over budget because halfway through shooting, they came to me and said, we have to do a flying motorcycle scene. Can you do that to make the movie interesting?
So you nod.
Yes, and you say yes at Shepperton Studios, and you fly back to the Berkshires where your studio is, and you make it work. But I think that's the difference, is that everyone knows that visual effects people have to be at the table in the beginning to figure it out. Right? What's the best use of the resources that you have?
Well, I'm going to actually just kind of go off slightly here. Talk to me about The Matrix, because we were chatting about it earlier, and obviously you think of that film and you think of that shot, the bullet time shot. While you were doing that, you said that the directors there, they were very cognitive of the VFX process and how important that was to the storytelling process. Was that the whole bullet time sort of sequence? How far ahead was that? Did you test for it? Or was that another one of those, we need you to build a flying motorcycle moments?
Well, first of all, everyone said it was going to be the worst movie ever made. Yeah. So we were working on the worst movie. It was a development from a movie that we worked on right before it, called What Dreams May Come, where we had actually done The Painted World, and my partner Joel Hynek won the Academy Award for it because we had figured out how to use LiDAR technology, which is basically a surveying tool, to go on the set in Montana. And it's as if you took a laser, if you were going to do this scene here, and you shoot the laser tens of thousands of points, and then you take it in the computer and you rebuild it. And for The Painted World, there was a gentleman named Stephen Hannock, who was a painter in the Berkshires in Western Mass, where I live. And he did paint strokes, and we scanned into the computer, which everyone was like, yeah, of course. No, this was 1997. Scanning was new. And we wrote software to do something called texture mapping, which is we took his paint strokes and we mapped them on the world. And so once we had done that, when the Wachowskis came to us, and they were like, we want to separate Keanu from the background. But we already knew how to do the background.
Right.
But we didn't have a camera that would move fast enough around a subject. there was no track that would move fast enough. And plus it would be on a single, like a single track.
Right.
And they wanted the camera to move up and down and be flexible. So we were in discussions with them in the beginning. There was a lot of testing. Like I said, we're in Western Massachusetts. No one was looking over our shoulders, so we were blowing things up and doing all kinds of crazy things. I wonder if I should say that.
I love blowing things
We
up.
love well, actually, my partner Joel Hynek, who won the Academy Award for What Dreams May Come, when we went to do our first movie, Judge Dredd, we were flying to Shepperton, and he told me about how he loved to blow things up, and he blew up a refrigerator that went over into his neighbor's yard and crashed into their garage. And I looked and I was like, do I want to work with this crazy person? But anyway, back to your point. I think the Wachowskis were very much ahead of their time.
Right.
You know, we looked at the Sentinels. How are we going to do that? Well, that has to be totally animated. Like, we can't do that. But there were a lot of tests. Keanu was really into working with us to figure it out.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think back then, and maybe even today, you know, we test a lot before we get to set
Right.
to make sure that what we're doing, the technology we're using, the software that we're writing,
Right.
because those were 240 still cameras in an arc that was created by the directors, right? And then we wrote software in between every single still camera.
amazing.
Interpolation it was called, right? And it was a lot of, as Dave will tell you, measuring to make sure every camera was pointing at exactly the same spot. And it couldn't be off, or you would have seen weird shifting.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
See, that's amazing. Well, first of all, I could listen to you talk about this forever, but that's amazing because that's now a plug-in on any editing platform.
Right,
It's
and like,
amazing.
exactly,
Yeah.
and I,
You can do it in iMovie.
yes,
Yeah.
it's very scary. So 5 years later, we're on the beach, and my older son took the camera and like, you know, went around himself and said, "Look, Mom, I just did the bullet time," and I kind of fell over in the sand and started to cry because, you know, it had cost so much, and then it just became part of the language.
That's amazing, though, how that has just changed the trajectory of how we do things. You spoke about the LiDAR scanning, actually. Dave, that's... Because that didn't... It's easy to think that LiDAR kind of came around the same time that virtual production came around. And it's actually... This is something that you've been using for quite a long time previous to what we know as virtual production now, right?
Yeah, actually, I went to college to be an engineer, and I studied surveying. So when LiDAR came around, I thought, oh, I can really use this.
Right.
So I started doing it as part of the VFX package a long time ago. But what LiDAR basically is a laser spinning scanner that shoots and returns a beam of laser light across whatever it sees from a point and measures the distance of every point so that you can create a scene like this scene that I'm looking at now as a point cloud. And then from that you develop normals and you develop vectors and you start scanning it with textures and it becomes a CG object.
So it's creating, just sorry to get it in my mind, it's not creating any, it's not taking any of the kind of photogrammetry of the area. It's just taking depth and structure.
Right.
That's all it's recording.
It's just recording shape as points.
Right. Okay. And then you would you then gather sort of images for the photogrammetry part of that as well?
Right. If you want high realism, you take pictures of everything that you scanned with the LiDAR, and you reskin the LiDAR image with those pictures, and it becomes very, very highly realistic. I did a version of that same technique for Quantum of Solace. Daniel Craig and Olga Kurylenko jump out of a burning DC-3 with one parachute between them.
I remember the scene well.
And we did 19 synchronized cameras, including one Arri 3 handheld inside a vertical wind tunnel in Bedfordshire, England. So they were actually floating on air when they
Wow.
did the scene, and they trained for months to do,
Together,
basically
just right. Yeah.
the stunts that they had to do in parachuting. And we LiDAR'd them as they were moving, and then we reskinned the virtual characters with the photography from 19 cameras, creating virtual objects of them, which then allowed us to create virtual camera positions that didn't exist in the photography.
So this is what you were doing, Diane, with the Matrix, and it's sort of utilizing again those same tools, bringing them into using modern techniques. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yes, I mean,
No,
you
take
know,
credit for it.
I mean, I think as a producer, or you know, I always thought of myself as creative. You know, who are the artists and the engineers and the people who are thinking about what's next in visual effects? So both Dave and I had the honor to work with a gentleman named Doug Trumbull, who is sort of the grandfather of visual effects, and he did Blade Runner 2001, A Space Odyssey, Close Encounters, yeah, all those.
Silent Running.
Silent Running, he directed, right? And he was doing higher frame rates, had a company called ShowScan in the 80s. And he was supposed to direct 2 films at a higher frame rate, and they didn't let him, so he moved to the Berkshires in Western Mass. And I moved up there to work on a project with him. And I think what he taught us was always to think outside the box, right? So when a producer or director says, you have to create something that's never been seen before, instead of going, oh my gosh, you just nod and say, okay. And you put a team together that's going to be as visionary as what's being required. And, you know, it's scary and exciting at the same time, right? I mean, we've all been on sets that, you know, you're not really sure if it's going to work, but you test it and you go on set and you hope it's going to work. But I think working with Doug, he really taught us to think outside the envelope. And how do you work on one film and take that technology? I mean, we were doing pre-visualization in 1992. Right. So, because in olden days, before that, was that olden days? You know, you'd shoot a person and then maybe you shoot something green screen and the poor compositor had to try and fit it together, right? And then all of a sudden pre-visualization happens, which is where you are designing a shot in low resolution wireframe animation. And then you can take the math to simplify it and send it to all the departments, right? So the models and miniatures you're shooting on the stage is going to match with the live action that you're shooting with the 20 people upstairs creating spaceships, but they're all working on the same math. And then the compositors get very excited because it all fits when they have to put it together. So, yeah, you know, technology comes out of a really good script, right? And having to design something that's never been seen before. And then you just, you know, you trust that the people that you get together are going to make it happen, and sometimes they do, and it's very exciting.
Well, that's interesting. It actually brings us to the next point, talking about previs or pre-visualization. If I'm right in saying the kind of rawest form of that is in the original storyboard, right, Mandy? It's sort of, that's how that started, and now that has, to your point, Diane, it's kind of progressed, digital forms of that, and now, so where is that break point? Where is that scene, Mandy, where kind of it ceases being the storyboard, and now it is something that's going up on the LED wall? Wherever we decide.
I think it depends on, like, for Daisy, for instance, it was, like, we had storyboarded out all of our concert sequences, because we shot in, like, originally scripted, it was 15 different concert venues, but we only were shooting in 2 actual locations, like 2 venue locations, and so we just had to, you know, redress them. For us, it was somewhere it was like in the middle of production, but that's we shot for almost a year. So
was it ever with those shots though, because presumably you've got sort of crowd shots, and like you said, you're changing the venue. Was that ever an option to kind of either go, nobody's going to be there, we're going to do the whole thing, you know, virtually in the background? Or
no one was there.
No one was. But it was never an option to go, maybe we'll get 200 extras in, and let's just go for it. You know, kind of.
Well, okay. Well, we did. Well, yes. So it was 200 extras that were there, and then our band. And then an actual stage. But we were in New Orleans, and New Orleans is not Hollywood, and you don't have access to as many actors.
Right.
And all of so Daisy Jones and the Six is a 1960s, 70s rock band TV show. And our extras that arrived This is the biggest band in 1970, which, and it's a pop band.
Yeah.
The extras that arrived did not fit that demo.
No.
I
That is
say
a
it
very
politely.
delicate way of saying that. Well done. Matt stuck the landing on that one, Mandy. Well done.
Yes. So we ended up having to redo it all.
Reshoot it all
Well,
of it,
not the
or
like
just-
we took out 90. So of the 200 extras that were there, we just removed them because.
That's like the harshest way of getting cut ever, doesn't it? Really.
Yes. And then we rented a soundstage in Redondo Beach and came in and our VFX team just like I'm in the show. Anyone who was working at that point is all in the show because we just had to
Go
get
for it.
people just in there. And so we had to redo it all. So the balancing act is kind of what we were talking about of
Right.
we had planned to do it one way and then it again fix it in post, but they did the work in terms of planning. It was
Yeah.
just something that you can't plan for.
That's an occasion where you didn't stick the landing quite
No,
the way you wanted to.
it was
What
not.
about when you do stick the landing though? When all the preparation and everything, you're like, great, you got the real A-team moment. I love it when a plan comes together. When tell us a moment when it's gone right.
I mean, I think of Little Fires Everywhere. Like
Right.
the fire,
Yeah,
the house
oh.
burning down.
Oh my goodness, yes. We worked on that production together, and I agree. I think it was vastly successful.
Yeah, that most of that is. I mean, we had a few flame bars on the house, but that's someone's house. They live there, so we couldn't really burn it down. And also, it's too expensive to build the front facing of a house and then burn that down because then you only get one shot at it.
So take me through. You've obviously got the actors, and then you said you got some flame burners. So basically, I'm guessing.
And a lot of
flames,
interactive lights.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's with interactive lights as well. And then on the LED wall.
This was not an LED wall
Yeah.
Oh,
setup. This was a
They had planned on it though.
we
it
started
was-
off down that road.
Yeah, that was a
Right.
planned. It was scrapped
we're gonna go
really
down.
late that it wasn't going to be an LED wall.
Right.
So then we fell back to doing what's called a black box miniature, which is basically a quarter scale version of the house as sheet metal bars. Then I took a
Physically, as sheet metal.
physically
Right.
sheet metal, and we went to a stage in Burbank,
Somewhere,
North Hollywood, an
a
effects
fire
stage.
stage, like
Yeah,
it's a specific
literally just
fire
for fire.
stage. Like has
And-
its own fireman, like.
Do it on this stage.
Yeah.
It's specifically built for
Right.
this, and it's enormous, and it has enormous cooling fans and water everywhere. But we put this quarter scale miniature of the house in, painted it all black, rigged it with flame bars, walnut shell ashes, smokers, fans, and hundreds of fire extinguishers, and selectively burned different pieces, different elements of it, in little pieces and then in the aggregate, so that it it's metal. It never burns up. It just stands there with flames off of it. And we created elements for compositing in post-production, where we could selectively matte flames from one scene and flames from another shot and flames from another shot, and mix and match them and paste them to the real house on location. And I think it's an enormously convincing effect. It is.
When you say matte, you mean essentially creating like a catalogue of flames and
Yes.
presumably explosions.
A
and things
library.
Like that. Yeah, and that's specifically you're going. This is our catalogue that we use for this scene. And,
Right, and it is subject specific to that house.
right, because of everything that you've done to kind of capture
Yeah,
the
the
right
eaves
light,
of the
right,
house.
right.
And did anybody see that show? Thank you.
You've got a really good fan in front of you.
I'll take that compliment any day. Won't
It's
you?
yours. Oh yeah. I mean,
No,
it's-
you-
you guys are.
Fantastic.
I also
Oh,
think of, like,
it is
the
a real
Man-
house,
Yeah.
but
Well, that you mentioned the Mandalorian there. That's because a lot of people's introduction to virtual production will be sort of watching the documentaries of the Mandalorian, and I think the thing that surprised everybody was you know, we see the volume, we see the huge, but I have a feeling what you're going to say is the miniatures, right? And mixing that with and the fact that Favreau, that's, and again, I still ask you, you talk about that you kind of got rid of the LED wall late. Did that not just turn everything upside down and everybody goes, oh no, we've got to raise the alarm, everything's changed? Or was it always a contingency? Do you just roll with it?
It sort of upset the apple cart for a day or two. There's always this wonderful moment when a producer or a director makes what I call the Campbell adjustment, which is basically, we're not going to.
Another great T-shirt quote.
Well, it bears a little explanation. So we're not going to do an LED wall. We're not going to do it blue screen or green screen. And then the director turns to you and says, so Dave, what are you going to do? Well,
give me 5 minutes.
Yeah. You go on this one.
At the time, it was a time thing. Like, we ran out of time physically, like in production, because with the LED, with all of it, with virtual production, is like you have to plan. We planned the whole thing around it, and then they actually rewrote the scene for the way that we shot it because we ran out of time. And working with Reese is lovely and magical, and she's the best person ever to work with.
I agree.
And for. But her schedule all of a sudden became like she was available, and then she was all of a sudden starring in 4 different TV shows at the same time. And so we couldn't use the LED wall anymore. We had to go to something that was more, that we could do it more in post because there wasn't enough planning. Yeah, schedules.
What happened to those assets though? Because I presume they would have been already created and ready to roll at that point.
Yeah, I think they were.
Yeah.
It just goes in.
Hit the cutting room floor?
Yeah, like they just go in.
Into the vapor,
into the space.
Does it give you more or less flexibility? Do you think when specifically talking about virtual production, because you are doing so much of that work up front? Do you think you go, yes, we've got more flexibility because we can adjust as we go, or it's baked in and now we've kind of got to, we either do it or we cut it? Where do you think that balance is? Is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I'm not going to say a problem.
A challenge.
The challenge with virtual production is if there's something that goes wrong, it's extremely expensive to fix in post. Like it's essentially cheaper almost to reshoot the scene.
You were talking about this earlier, actually.
And an important thing to remember as you're doing virtual production on an LED stage is that the cinematographer is now the lead compositing supervisor.
Right. So the person looking down there, they're in charge.
It is a game of professional, what's wrong with this picture?
Right. That's another good T-shirt quote there, Dave.
But can I add something on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because having done some corporate work, green screen work, right? So my partner Paula Combs, who also worked with Doug, we've been doing this for 30 years, and so we were shooting something for Hewlett Packard Enterprises in Las Vegas because that's where they were. So we had to take a green screen and make a green screen stage in a ballroom, which you do, and we created the set before we got there, right? And everybody approved it in the ad agency and all those things. And they had lots of setups, 2 executive, 5 executive, these people facing this way. And we had designed all kinds of different camera angles. And they put 5 people on the set, and the guy in the end was really tall, and he was over the Hewlett Packard Enterprises logo. And so, the ad agency is like, oh my God. The client's like, he's over the logo. And Paul said, give me a second. And he went, doot, 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 and he moved the logo up on the wall in about 5 minutes. And then another setup was 2 white chairs and a coffee table, and the coffee table looked awful on set, And I went into old-fashioned mode where I'm running around a convention center looking for a coffee table, right? And Paul goes, who makes that coffee table? And he found the model online and he reskinned it in 20 minutes, right? So, right, and that's green screen as opposed to LED. I mean, they're very different,
Right.
but I think there is, if you work with people that have a lot of experience at their fingertips, and when software doesn't work, because in this world, inevitably, something crashes. But if you work with people that have been doing this for 30 years and they know people, and you can call the head of the company in Norway and go like, we're on set in Vegas and can you fix this right now? And they do. So I think part of it is also just having a great team, having great resources, and knowing what's flexible and not. And also, we talked about this, is communication, right? You get on set and you tell the director or the agency or whoever what they can and can't do, as opposed to them having expectations about what they can and can't do, right? So sometimes they'll say, can we do this? And we'll be like, yeah, no. Or that's going to take an extra day. And so they make the schedule and the budget decision, right, to keep crew for 4 extra hours or shoot an extra day. So that as a producer is our job, I would say, Mandy, right? Which is you have to be in great communication with whoever the director is, whoever the production company is, whoever the ad agency is, for them to know, so that they don't have different expectations when you get to set. Because I think in my entire career, one time doing a commercial, did the client come in from Chicago. I was working in New York at the time. They looked at the commercial, they said, this is great, and they left. We didn't even know what to do. There were no changes. We were like, don't you want to do anything? They're like, no, it's great. We're going to go out to dinner. And like my team was like, what? I've been working this a long time. It happened once. Exactly.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Virtual production, it's cut across every single department. I think that's fair to say, right? It's everything from lighting to grip to art department to post to camera to blah, blah. As a producer, Mandy, I'm putting you with the tough answering questions. How does that like nothing else? It's just ripped through every department. How was the adjustment period for that, shall we say? Or was it, let's just get on with the job. Let's pick it up, let's move, let's go. Be flexible, smile on your face, and it is what it is now.
Flexible, smile on your face, and you
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. As a creative, it's like, it's personal, like, it's sad because I was so excited to do it this one way, and like, you invest so much time. But, I think that's the nature of our job, is like you have to just be flexible at any given moment.
It's interesting. You spoke about I think it was you were saying Daisy Jones and the Sixer, because when you started that to when you finished that, that was two very different times. We were
it was
pre-
a
and
5-year
post-pandemic.
show.
Yeah, pre and post pandemic. So to your point, what you planned versus what you actually ended up executing must have been two very different visions. Yeah,
and even the vision that we were 10 days away from first rolling cameras for Daisy, then the world shut down. And then during the pandemic, the idea actually was that we were going to use like LED walls through like every single concert scene, because that was the safest way to create this in the new COVID world that we would live in, or that we were living in. And then just the dollar sign was unreal. I genuinely was like, this is crazy. And Amazon was like, okay, great. Like, no one really kind of seemed to bat an eye about it. And I was like, well, thanks, Uncle Bezos.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. But what we want, what was discovered is the authenticity, that, we wanted our actors to be, like, we wanted the band to be there. We wanted them to experience, we wanted a crowd there. We wanted our crew. We wanted all of that, because that's what resonates on screen.
Is the better performance.
Yeah, like all of it. And so then, as we were coming back from the pandemic, then it was kind of 50-50. We were going to 50-50 it. We could shoot in LA. No, we could shoot in New Orleans, but we couldn't shoot in LA because the restrictions in LA were still the cases. And then as we started filming, more and more things opened up.
Right.
But I think you just have to be flexible.
Well, you mentioned about the performance and the actors. That's it's sort of, I think we've heard this question sort of asked a few different ways, but at the beginning it was like, oh, this is fantastic. We're going to be able to put the actors right there. Now we are much further into working with virtual production. Has that emerged to kind of be the actual case? Does it really help the performance that much, or sort of?
Were you there the day during morning show season 1 with Jennifer Aniston in the back seat of the SUV?
Oh my God.
And we had
This is a good
LED
one.
screens all the way around. And I'm standing there working on lighting, and she rolls the window down on the SUV and she leans out to me and she says, "Now I know where I am."
Because up to that point, it's just all green, right?
It is so cool, like to see the actors, like their lights, like just
Yeah.
like you could just see how much they're like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool.
It really is making that much of being submerged in an
Yeah.
environment like that. It really is.
Yeah, it really does.
fantastic.
I mean, it's in Little Fires we used the LED screens on our driving plates,
Right.
all of our driving scenes, and this. I mean, the thing with Little Fires is we had Reese and Carrie, who are just exceptionally talented and so like A-list experience. But then we had a bunch of kids, well, young adults, and just without the experience. So Reese and Carrie can they can envision what they're doing. It's a little bit harder when you just have less experience. And those the teens, they were incredible because they knew the scene, they knew where they were going, and they could watch what was happening. So they could because with driving plates too, there's motion, a car,
Right.
there's, so they could really authentically act as if
Right.
if there's like a bright light out the window, they could like react to it.
No longer those scenes where the driver looks at the passenger for 30
Yeah,
seconds.
and never moves the steering
Yeah,
wheel.
and you're like, they're going to crash by this point. Everybody's watched that
Yeah,
scene, haven't they?
it's cool. I mean, I will say for actors, I mean, I'm not one, so I can't speak for them, but I see them a lot. And it really is night and day, the reaction.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Amazing. I got a question, and anybody can answer this. How does this scale? I spoke about The Mandalorian. You've spoken about the volumes, it's kind of larger. You talked about how this kind of can go down. You said a TV actor, camera. That is kind of the most basic form. To make this, is this something? Do you think that is more that is achievable for low budget films, indie films, short films? And also, if it is, then how do we do it?
We do it by embracing the technology, learning more, getting more experience, buying in, and just by being clever.
Right. Utilizing that, you spoke about Unreal Engine, which is free, basically.
It's kind of not going to be free anymore.
At the moment.
Get it now.
At the moment, yeah.
Yeah, get it now.
At the
it's
moment,
free.
it's free, but
Right.
I think someone has caught on to the idea that there's money in this.
Feeling you might be right, yeah. But the point, that sort of barrier of entry at the moment, anyway. You think it's low enough that it is achievable by sort of, for example, sort of people taking short films to festivals?
Like anything in our business, in the right hands.
Right. Okay. So it really is about learning. It's getting online and learning everything that you can to roll with it. I have a pointed question, which I did prepare you for here, because we talk about sort of we spoke about the pandemic briefly there, and there's no denying that within the pandemic it kind of dramatically accelerated the adoption of virtual production. It was suddenly everywhere. But I wonder, and this is for all of you to answer, I wonder what we missed in our haste to implement this. What did we miss because we were just running too fast?
I know for sure it's the learning curve.
Right.
When I do any kind of for that matter, any kind of visual effect, but I used to work for a company called Introvision back in the day, and I observed it then for the first time. that you would be setting up a scene and setting up a shot, and the director, the producer, the production designer, any number of people, you could watch them looking at what you were doing and looking at the monitor, and then suddenly, bing, you could see the light going on over their head.
Right.
And I still to this day call it the light bulb moment.
Right.
And it's, anybody ever read Stranger in a Strange Land? Hooray. It's the grok moment.
That's good. There's one person here who is going to have to put that on the t-shirt. Mandy, sort of the same thing. What was that? What do you think we missed?
For me, I didn't go to film school. I came from the news world. I was a news editor before I became do scripted television. And there's a learning curve when you enter into the space of like the etiquette on set, like on set etiquette. Right. And to me, that's the biggest thing that was missed, is that the technology is there, but we do things on set in a certain way, and there's people in positions that are doing certain things. And now we've invited an entire, not just like one person, it's like a crew. Like when you have, like the whole virtual production, like, right. You've got all of it. It's a crew of 25 people, all on their own, who they're in charge of the technology. But most of them have never been on a film set before. Like that, to me, that was right. like during the pandemic, this technology really skyrocketed, and so oftentimes I'll get someone just like walking behind a camera shot, or like walking or kind of just sitting at like Video Village next to, whomever, and there's things and there's things, and so. As someone who didn't go to film school, I didn't know the etiquette, so I too had to learn.
Right.
But to me, that's the biggest challenge. Is now and the thing is that these are masters at their craft as well.
They're a necessity.
But they come from gaming.
But they
right.
And so
Absolutely
there's
different world.
You forget. At least I forgot coming back that. There's an etiquette, and you have to communicate that, and if you don't, it's time and money.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think film is a collaborative effort. It is. One person doesn't make a film, and so I think all of this technology was sort of happening in these silos across the country, right? And we got back, and the technology was here. And people hadn't been on set to see that evolution, right? So to your point, like, we have a lot of people that don't know what's going on, right? And one of the things we're doing is actually in Western Mass, we're building an international film education center to teach the business of film. Because sometimes, even if kids go to film school, like we've done production assistant classes, and I say, who do you report to when you go to the set? And they go, the director. And I say, not if you're going to work day 2, right? So I think, and because of where we are in Doug Trumbull, we have a very robust visual effects community in Western Massachusetts, and it's one of the things that now that I'm connecting with these two amazing people, we need to teach, because the technology is changing so quickly, right? And you can go to film school, but maybe your professor hasn't actually been on set for 20 years, right? So how can we create a place where young people are getting hands-on experience? Because that's what they need.
Right.
They need internships. They need mentorships. In Massachusetts, we need to diversify film crews.
Right.
We need to offer film and visual effects classes to those underserved communities, right? I mean, Boston, sorry, white Irish men, right? It is. They're the Irish, right? So, but I think that's happening in Massachusetts, and it has to happen across the country, right? We need to give, I don't know about you, Mandy, but as a visual effects producer, I was usually the only woman on set.
I'm always.
Right.
Like,
so,
Hello Sunshine.
Right. For Eraser, was a Schwarzenegger movie. I was one of two women. Oh, I hired the other woman. And it was a long time ago. It was in the 90s. But, you know, somebody came up and said, can you give me a back rub? And I said, not if you want your visual effects, right? So, and it has changed, but not so much in this particular arena. And I think it's really important, as you say, Mandy, well, both of you, is that we have to get our young people on set. We have to give them the technology and because they have a voice, they have something to say. They want to know this technology. So that's kind of what I see as
Fantastic.
next.
Yeah.
In my own defense, I have to say, I write textbooks, I teach at film schools,
Yeah.
and most of all, when I shoot as a cinematographer, many times I have an all-woman crew.
The book you speak of, I believe it's the Essential Reading. Is it at at USC? Is it?
USC, UCLA, AFI, Chapman, New York Film Academy.
Just a few then.
The Beijing Film Institute.
Oh yeah, that's right. You showed me a picture. Yeah.
There's a Mandarin translation.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely amazing. I think we are exactly at time actually. So I'd like to say, first of all, do you want to do some questions? Have we got some time? Anybody want to throw their hand up for a question? We got one over here.
Yes.
Go for it.
It's you.
Okay, so I teach at a community college, and we're teaching virtual production at a Bay Area community college. We're doing it with 6 Bay Area community colleges, and we are very scrappy and low budget. We don't have a volume. We're doing green screen, but I'm just wondering, like, what are the intro skills that you think will help people get their first step into the industry? We're really like baby steps. So
Good question. Yes, what are the intro steps to getting into the virtual production space?
You want me to go first? I was teaching a class at AFI, a freshman class, like in the first few weeks of the term for the freshmen at AFI, and a student asked me, you know, I really, really, really want to become a filmmaker. What are your tips? And I said, you know, I had to think about it for a moment, but I said, I don't know that you ever really become anything. Either you are or you aren't. Are you making a film? You're a filmmaker.
There you go. So with Mandy's sort of those steps of having been in control and the role of the producer there, where would you sort of say is the most accessible route into virtual production?
Do it. Like,
Just go for it.
yeah, like I like the sink or swim method personally. You know, but yeah, I mean, I think you can do it at any level. I mean, we all have iPhones. Like, my iPhone is better than my Canon SLR. Like that's
Right.
crazy. So I think the intro to virtual production is, you know, you can create it in Adobe. Like it's basic, which is amazing, and it's a technology that's available for everyone to learn, and it just kind of gets bigger. You don't have to start big and get small. You can start small and get big. The intro to me is just do it. Like, shoot this,
Right.
and then go
Create
figure
your
out how to,
background,
you know, then go shoot your scene green, and then figure it out. Like, see what that is.
Right.
I am considering, against my better judgment,
Oh no.
writing some curriculum for learning virtual production.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that I have pretty bad carpal tunnel, and
I'll type it for you.
I don't call it carpal tunnel. I call it the Nobel Prize for Literature.
No, I mean, I think there's a huge lack of curriculum that,
Yes.
like, we're just struggling with the curriculum.
Well, I originally wrote a curriculum for, I'm a member of the American Society of Cinematographers, the ASC, and during the pandemic, we realized that we were all kind of behind the 8 ball learning this stuff, and there was no way to get out publicly onto stages and learn it because of the pandemic. So I wrote a 2-day curriculum for the ASC called Masterclass for Masters, which was only for full members. I had 75 full members of the ASC in that class. And I'm thinking about repurposing that, but it exists as a PowerPoint.
I think you've got a few fans of that idea, Dave.
Yeah, well, and we're developing high school curriculum right now with the visual effects people that live in Western Mass. We've gotten the go-ahead to take film into every high school. So
Wow.
happy to talk to you about it. And I agree with Mandy, just shoot. Green screen is easy enough to put up, even just fabric.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're basics, like how many feet you need to be away from it, right? And there's a great book that was put out by the Visual Effects Society, of which I've been a member of, by Susan Werman and maybe Jeff Oken.
And me.
Were you on that too?
Yeah, I contributed heavily to it.
Okay, good. And Dave.
Gets around, doesn't he?
And but there's another volume coming out, and I would say it's got a lot of just tips, right? How you light it, how far you need to be away. I mean, lights are different now than they were when we used to be doing green screen. I mean, it's just it's not that expensive to do.
Right.
You can put a green screen outside and shoot against green screen, and just have them do it. I think that's the best thing. And there are a lot of people to help, right? There's the Visual Effects Society. There's Dave.
There's
who's
Dave.
now teaching to
Dave's always
everybody. You know, Visual Effects Society, there's now thousands of members around the country, and I'm sure there are people here in San Francisco that would help, right? That's easy enough to put you in touch with them, and people that could come in and just sort of help start it with you, because they
And-
really do want to.
And most of them are blabbermouths, so once you get them started, they won't shut up.
You'll have to kick them out, yeah?
Dare I complete our buzzword bingo by saying YouTube? Is there any really reliable resources on YouTube that are good for this stuff?
Yeah, there are a lot.
There is a lot. Okay, maybe I'll bug you for some of those later. Any other questions? Oh, we got one over here.
Hi, my name is Giovanni Cortez. I'm an independent filmmaker here in the Bay Area. And as a writer and director that doesn't have like big pockets, my most recent project, Run, we did virtual pieces to it. And it almost tanked due to the fact that it happened right before the pandemic. And so one of my questions is what is your advice to writer directors that are really trying to make work that competes with the work out there, don't necessarily have the funding?
So how do you compete with writers, directors, but on lower budgets?
In my experience of that, you have to let your own time be a substitute for money. And you have to go at it patiently, but diligently. You know, we were talking about Doug Trumbull. He was one of my mentors for many years. And one of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me is be unreasonable. And what he meant when he said that is, don't let people reason you out of what you want.
I would say also, there are a lot of visual effects people, hiding out, right? Truly. This is about as public as we get, right? We're behind. We're behind the scenes people.
I'm
But-
notoriously a hermit.
Yeah. So I now lecture about like the evolution of visual effects in Western Mass, and people are like, "Oh, I didn't know you did the Matrix." Like, we just don't really talk about it. There are probably people here that, if they like the subject of your film, will help you, right? Like when you're looking for talent or to come to your film, do visual effects the same way. There's probably somebody that would coach you, help you, depending on what you need, and really help you think it out and what's it look like. I love the fact that you guys shot a model recently, right? And just very quickly, like we were doing Eraser with Schwarzenegger, and there was a guy, CGI guy, Michael Orman. He was like, "I can make smoke." We put him in a room. Michael, go make smoke. And every week we'd be like, "How's the smoke coming, Michael?" And like 4 weeks later, my partner Joel was like, I need the damn smoke, excuse me. and Michael's like, I'm almost there. And Joel went and like blew something up on the stage, right? So, but you're always looking at, I would say, whatever you need, really look at the best way to do it. Does it need to be VR? Can you do a small model? Can you there's a lot available now that's not as expensive as an LED wall. And then I just heard about a friend's son who was in LA, and an LED stage let them come shoot for a day, because right now with the strike, nobody's there. So I think there's probably resources. You just have to pick up the phone, and I'm sure you'll find them here.
Begging is a great visual effects technique.
Yeah. Bribing with food.
Yes, and liquor.
We are like we hide in dark rooms most of the time. And food, you'd be surprised. But no, the stage, I was like, especially right now, but these huge, massive stages, they're not used 24/7. Like, it seems like they are, because a lot of shows are using them, but they're not. And often they will donate stage time, or they will donate personnel, or they'll give. I too is a professor at AFI, only adjunct. I'm only there like once a week. But the studio at Manhattan Beach let us, one of the student films, shoot there for like a day, and it was great. Like, it was so cool. But yeah, I mean, really, there's a lot of resources out there. I'm happy to get you in touch with some, or whatever. Between the three of us, we've got a lot of friends. But yeah, I mean, I think ask for favors. Ask for as someone who went straight into scripted television, I have not had the opportunity to be an independent filmmaker, and it's kind of the thing I haven't done, and I just love it. My mentor, Lynn Shelton, is like one of the, before she's like, love her. Like, she was going to be my first, I was going to do her film after Little Fires, and I was so excited because I was like, yes, finally, like something scrappy. Like, these big cool budgets, like, they're amazing, but they're exhausting, and I can't wait to do I don't know, I Volunteers tribute.
And it's presentation too. I mean, if you go and say, can I get something for free, that's one thing. If you go to the company and say, you guys want to do something really interesting and cool, that's a whole different presentation.
Food is really important. If you cannot pay people but you feed them well, they will do. That's what I tell all the students and everything. Just feed people. You don't feed people, they will not come back and work for you.
That completes our buzzword bingo. I think it was food and liquor was the last two. Anybody got that? No, okay. We're going to wrap it up there, but I would like everybody to give a round of applause. Thank you very much to Amanda, David, and Diane. Thank you so much for coming today. Mill Valley Film Festival, thank you very much as well.